No records, no memory. Yet she killed. Welcome to Mystery Magnifier. I am your host, Phantom. Comment where you're listening from today. Your messages inspire me. Now, let the mystery unfold. It was the sort of morning that London does to perfection. A pearl grey sky with a thin drizzle that seemed less weather than atmosphere, and a city moving under its own dignified inertia. I had just finished breakfast with Poirot in his flat overlooking Whitehaven Mansions, and we were in that agreeable interval between coffee and the day's first interruption. Poirot, as ever, had arranged the breakfast table with a geometrical precision that would have satisfied Euclid. The butter dish stood at a right angle to the toast rack. The spoon lay parallel to the rim of the saucer. Even the crumbs appeared to have been negotiated into a tidy frontier on the plate. He sat opposite me, fastidious in a dove-grey suit, the tips of his mustaches as perfectly waxed as though he had just stepped out of an advertisement for Belgian propriety. "My friend," he said, holding his cup so that his little finger rose in a delicate salute, "you observe the world, yes? But you do not always see it." I had heard this remark, or a cousin of it, often enough to smile rather than protest. "And you, Poirot, see too much and tell too little." He looked at me with a gentle reproachment as a schoolmaster might look at a promising pupil who shows indolence. "It is not that I tell too little. It is that you wish to be told too quickly." Before I could reply, the bell rang. The sound came with such urgency that even Poirot's composure acknowledged it. I rose to answer, but Poirot waved me down. "Non, non, remain seated. I will see to it. One must not spring like a jack-in-the-box at every noise." He opened the door. A man stood there, brim of his hat dripping, his coat collar turned up in a manner that attempted to be casual but managed only to be theatrical. I recognized him at once. Inspector Japp of Scotland Yard, burly, blunt, and possessed of that affectionate impatience towards Poirot which men of practical habit reserve for geniuses who make them look slow. "Morning, Monsieur Poirot. Sorry to barge in," he said, stepping inside without waiting for an invitation, as if the weather had shoved him through the door. "Can I have a word?" Poirot's eyebrows lifted by a fraction. "But certainly, my good Japp. You're always welcome. Take care, though, you will drip on the rug. It is Turkish. It does not like the English rain." Japp glanced down and shuffled his boots an inch in embarrassment. "Right. Sorry." Poirot moved him towards the sitting room with the gentle authority of a maitre d'. "You have breakfasted?" "Not properly. Tea at the Yard?" "Then you shall have coffee," Poirot decided, and rang for Georges. This dampness in the air. Bah! It chills the little grey cells. Coffee warms them. Japp waited until Georges had glided away before speaking. He was the sort who found subtlety inconvenient and confessed it openly. "There's been a murder," he said. Poirot gave a tiny nod, as though the word murder were merely a bracketed note in a conversation already in motion. "Where?" "Chislehurst, at a house called Wisteria Lodge. Big place. Belongs to a chap called Sir Reuben Astwell." I had heard the name, vaguely. Astwell was one of those discreetly wealthy men who seem to appear at every important charity dinner and in the background of photographs, featuring other people's accomplishments. Japp continued. "Sir Reuben's secretary was found dead this morning. Shot in the study. No sign of forced entry. People in the house, as you'd expect. Family, guests, staff. The usual close circle and all that." Poirot's eyes grew a shade more attentive. Closed circles pleased him. The world, to Poirot, was always a clock or a chessboard. Problems with a finite number of pieces. "There is something else," said Japp, and now his face assumed the expression of a man who is about to tell you a fact he dislikes, because it sounds ridiculous. "The dead fellow isn't the strangest part." Poirot lifted a hand. "Ah, we come to the spice?" "We found a woman's handbag in the study," Japp went on. "Small thing, expensive. Crocodile skin. There's a pair of gloves in it, a powder compact, a silver cigarette case. Everything proper, except there's no woman who owns it." "No woman," I echoed. It sounded absurd. "No woman in the house, I mean. No woman matching it. Sir Reuben says it doesn't belong to his niece, or to the housekeeper, or to any female relative. There were only 2 women staying the night. Miss Astwell, his niece, and a married couple's maid. Neither recognizes it." Poirot was very still. I knew the look. It was the look of a cat that smells a mouse and makes no movement at all. "And you are certain," he asked softly, "that the handbag was not planted later?" "We found it near the fireplace, half hidden behind a plant stand. But the room was locked from inside when the body was discovered. Sir Reuben's butler swears it was locked, so unless the killer climbed in through a chimney or turned into vapor, it was there at the time." Poirot tapped his own chest gently with 2 fingertips. "And this woman, she's not merely unknown, she is not in existence." "That's the trouble," said Japp. "We don't have a name, a face, or even a hint she was ever there. Yet her things are sitting as bold as brass in a murder room that was apparently sealed. It's as if she stepped out of thin air and left her handbag to prove it." "You have searched for fingerprints?" "Plenty. Mostly Sir Reuben's. Astwell girls. Servants. A smudge on the compact that doesn't match anyone in the house. Could be old. Could be new. Not much use." Poirot stood and began to pace lightly across. The rug, his steps quiet, his hands clasped behind him. To pace is not Poirot's natural habit. He prefers to sit and let the mind do the walking, so I took it as a sign of real interest. "Tell me," he said, "of these people in the house." Japp pulled a notebook from his pocket. "All right. Sir Reuben Astwell, of course. 62, widower, gets about with a cane. Sharp head. Hard sort. Keeps a tight ship with his money. Then there's his niece, Miss Celeste Astwell, 26. Pretty, makes no secret of disliking the old man's control. She's engaged to a fellow called Major Felix Hawthorne, currently in India. Not due home for another fortnight." Poirot murmured. "Engagement across oceans. Always there is a tension." "There's also Dr. Ambrose Larkin," Japp continued, "old friend of Sir Reuben's. He's a physician, kept in the house because Sir Reuben's health isn't what it was. Larkin's been there a month. Quiet sort, observant. Doctors," Poirot said. "They observe and do not always speak. Then you've got the guests. Lady Ursula Vane, Sir Reuben's cousin. She arrived yesterday afternoon. 60-ish, sharp tongue, sharper eyes. Society woman, money troubles. Always sniffing around Astwell's will, if you ask me. Along with her is her son, Mr. Gideon Vane, 35. Charming on the surface. Keeps losing jobs, gambling debts. Looks like a greyhound with a hangover." I bit back a smile. The description was pure Japp. "Another guest is Mr. Lionel Brackett," Japp went on. "Business associate, here for a private weekend about some deal. He says he went to bed early. His alibi is his own word and the footman who brought him whiskey at 11. Poirot nodded slowly. "And the dead man? Martin Gill?" I asked. "Astwell's secretary for 5 years. Clean record, 38. Not liked, but respected. Did bookkeeping, correspondence, all that. Found in the study at 7 this morning by the butler. Shot through the heart, close range. No struggle." Poirot's voice was mild. "And their emotions this morning, did you observe, Japp?" Inspector Japp shrugged. "Oh, they were all suitably shocked. Sir Reuben controlled. Miss Celeste hysterical for 5 minutes, then very calm. Lady Ursula dramatic, of course. Gideon Vane pale as a sheet. Brackett indignant at being disturbed. Servants frightened. The usual." "The usual," Poirot repeated thoughtfully, as if he did not entirely agree that there is ever such a thing. Georges appeared with a tray and set coffee for Japp, with the solemnity of a high priest offering a sacrament. Poirot waited until he had gone before speaking again. "And now," he said. "You wish me to come?" "Well, yes." Jap looked a trifle defensive. "You like these puzzles, and this one's a corker. We've got a murder in a locked room and a woman who may not exist. It's almost theatrical. I'd rather have you there than have the newspapers get hold of it and make a circus." Poirot regarded him kindly. "My friend, the newspapers will make a circus in any case, but we shall attempt to give them, instead, a neat little performance with a proper ending." He turned to me. "Hastings, you will accompany me. You are already curious, I see it in your eyes. Besides, there is rain and you will be useful in carrying the umbrella." "Thanks," I said dryly. "An honor." Poirot smiled, the corners of his mouth lifting just enough to show pleasure without vanity. "Come then. Let us go to Wisteria Lodge. The lady who never existed. She interests Hercule Poirot exceedingly." And so, with Jap grumbling affectionately at Poirot's pace, and Poirot grumbling affectionately at Jap's boots, we set off into the damp London morning toward a house full of people who, each of them, were about to discover that my friend did not come merely to ask questions. He came to see. The drive out to Chislehurst took us through a countryside that looked rinsed clean by the persistent rain. Bare branches glistened like polished bone, and the hedgerows steamed faintly where the mist thickened. Poirot sat opposite me in the motorcar, immaculately composed despite the jolting of the road. He had brought with him a small valise, a folded newspaper, and, I suspect, an entire invisible arsenal of tiny conclusions already forming in the vaults of his mind. "You are thinking of the handbag," I said. Poirot tilted his head. "Am I so transparent, mon ami?" "To me, perhaps. You have been fingering your mustache with your left hand. That means a problem that piques you but does not yet vex you." He made a tiny sound of approval. "Ah, you observe. Very good. Yes, I think of the handbag, but more of the woman. Not her face, for we do not know it. Not her name, for it may be false. I think of why she is necessary." "Necessary?" "Yes. In a good mystery, nothing is superfluous. If her things are there, either she was there, or someone wishes us to think so. In either case, she serves a purpose." Before I could pursue that, the car turned between two stone pillars bearing iron gates. A long sweep of gravel led to Wisteria Lodge, a large old-fashioned house with broad windows and a portico that attempted grandeur without quite reaching it. Wisteria, I noted, still clung in dried brown bunches to the trellis, like the ghost of a more charming season. Inspector Jap paid the driver and leapt out with relief. "Here it is, and I'll tell you, Poirot, the lot inside are wound tight as fiddles. I've had to keep a constable at every door to stop them drifting into each other's rooms. Not that they're eager to help." Poirot's gaze traveled over the facade, then the grounds, then the quiet upper windows. "The house is like a face," he murmured. "It tells you at once whether it is used to secrets." We were met at the door by a butler who looked as though he had been built out of restraint. His hair was silver, his jaw square, his voice so controlled that one felt it could slice bread. "Inspector, Monsieur Poirot." His eyes moved to me and politely filed me under appendage. "Sir Reuben is in the morning room. He expects you." The morning room was bright despite the weather, full of a formal comfort that had grown slightly tired. Chairs that were too good to be replaced, rugs too dignified to be thrown out. Sir Reuben Astwell sat in a high-backed chair by the fire, his cane resting against his knee like a second limb. He was a compact man with iron-grey hair and a bulldog set to his mouth. His eyes, pale and penetrating, came up as we entered. "Monsieur Poirot," he said. His tone had the brusque cordiality of someone forced by circumstance to entertain a stranger. "I'm obliged to you for coming. Jap tells me you insisted." Poirot bowed. "Not insisted, Sir Reuben. Merely suggested that if one has a knot, it is sometimes wise to call for a man who likes to untie them." Sir Reuben's mouth twitched. "I've never enjoyed knots of any kind." Sit down, please." Poirot sat, making sure his chair was precisely square to the hearth before he did. "First, may I offer you my sympathy? A man is dead in your house. That is an ugly thing." "It is." Sir Reuben's gaze flicked briefly to the window and back. Martingale was efficient. Not a friend, perhaps, but I relied upon him, and now I find him in my study as though he were a rabbit shot in a field. He was found at 7, yes? 7 precisely. Avery, he nodded toward the door, meaning the butler, came to tell me my correspondence had arrived. He found the study door locked. He knocked. No answer. We forced it. Gill was in my chair, slumped forward. The revolver was on the carpet by his right hand. Poirot folded his hands. "You did not touch anything?" "Of course not. I've had enough dealings with the Yard to know better." Poirot's eyes softened. "Then perhaps you will help me by telling me of your evening." Sir Reuben spoke without obvious hesitation. Dinner had been at 8, with himself, Celeste, Lady Ursula, Gideon, Mr. Brackett, and Dr. Larkin. After dinner, they had sat in the drawing room. Cards were suggested. Celeste declined. Brackett played a rubber with Gideon and Lady Ursula, while Sir Reuben and Dr. Larkin talked by the fire. At 10:30, Lady Ursula retired. Gideon a little after 11. Brackett, he believed, went up at 11. Celeste said good night at 10 and went to her room. Dr. Larkin left at about midnight. Sir Reuben himself read in the library until 12:30, and then went to bed. "And Mr. Gill?" Poirot asked. He excused himself after dessert, said he had letters to finish. That was not unusual. He often worked late. Poirot nodded, as if aligning the pieces on an interior board. "Your study?" he asked lightly. Mr. Gill used it at night. It is where he worked when he needed privacy. The desk in there is mine, but I allow him access. He knew my habits and papers. And last evening, did anyone else go to the study? Sir Reuben's mouth set. "Not that I know of." "You know of," Poirot echoed. "But perhaps not all that happened is known. There are always the moments when a servant enters with a tray, when a guest wishes to fetch a book. The small movements in a house. I don't keep a ledger of each footstep," Sir Reuben snapped, then steadied himself. "But Avery can tell you who went where. The man remembers everything." Poirot accepted the suggestion with a nod. "And now the object that perplexes you, the handbag." Sir Reuben's eyes sharpened. "Yes, explain it if you can. I've never seen the thing." "Nor your niece?" "Celeste says she hasn't. I believe her. She's many things, but not a thief of handbags." The pause gave more away than the words. "And Lady Ursula?" He gave a short laugh without amusement. "Ursula owned so many handbags she could furnish a shop, but this isn't hers. She swore it, loudly." Poirot's voice remained soft. "You do not sound convinced." "I'm not convinced of anything, Monsieur Poirot, except that someone in this house has played a clever, devilish trick. My cousin and her son have both come here in hopes of my generosity. Brackett wants a contract. Celeste wants freedom. Any of them could have quarreled with Gill. Any of them might wish to frighten me into changing plans." His jaw clenched. "But a woman who doesn't exist, that is nonsense." Poirot looked at him almost tenderly. "Often, Sir Reuben, when something appears nonsense, it is because we are missing the first step. Tell me, did Mr. Gill ever speak of a woman to you? A visitor? A correspondence perhaps less official than your business letters?" Sir Reuben's expression shifted only slightly, but to Poirot, slight shifts were earthquakes. "Gill kept his private life private." "That is not an answer." Sir Reuben shut his eyes for a fraction, the way a man does who sees an uncomfortable fact approaching. "There were rumors," he admitted. "A typist in town, a widow. I never asked. It was not my affair." Poirot let a silence bloom, then said, "And did you ever receive letters addressed to him here?" "Occasionally. He took them at once. I never opened them." "Bien," We were interrupted by a quick, light step and the rustle of skirts. Miss Celeste Astwell came in without knocking, as if the house, at least in her mind, belonged to her. She was pretty in a cool, deliberate way, dark hair pinned with an elegant impatience, eyes too bright to be quite innocent, a slim figure in mourning grey that looked chosen for becomingness rather than grief. She paused when she saw us, and for an instant her face performed the proper shock again. Then it settled. "Uncle, Inspector." "Oh." Her gaze moved to Poirot with frank curiosity. "So you're Monsieur Poirot. I've read about you." Poirot rose and bowed. "Mademoiselle, one hopes in good accounts." She gave a little smile that did not reach her eyes. "Good enough to make Scotland Yard summon you at breakfast. I suppose that means we're in for a long day." "Perhaps," Poirot said pleasantly. "But long days often end with short truths." She looked at him as if trying to decide whether that was a compliment or a warning, and then turned to Sir Reuben. "They're asking to see the study again. May I go with them?" Sir Reuben's hand tightened on his cane. "You have no need to be in that room." "Maybe not, but I was there last night, before Martin died. If there's something I saw that matters, I'd rather say it to the right person." Poirot's eyes warmed, not with trust, but with interest. "You were in the study last night, mademoiselle?" "Yes." She met his gaze steadily. "At about 9. Martin sent word that Uncle's solicitor had telephoned. I went in to ask what it was about. Martin was alone, writing. He seemed tense. He said it was nothing urgent, and I left." Poirot inclined his head. "Tense for what reason?" She shrugged delicately. "I didn't ask. But he looked like a man waiting for someone who might not be friendly." Jap shifted. "That's the first I've heard of it." Celeste gave him a cool look. "You didn't ask me the right questions, Inspector. You asked where I was and whether I hated Martin. You didn't ask what Martin looked like." Poirot interposed softly, smoothing the air. "We shall ask many right questions today. Will you come with us to the study, mademoiselle? Sometimes a memory wakes in the room where it slept." Sir Reuben started to object, then thought better of it, his pride warring with anxiety. "Very well. But keep your head clear, Celeste. This is no game." She smiled faintly. "No, uncle, but someone here is playing one." The study lay at the rear of the house, a somber room with heavy curtains and a smell that was part leather, part coal smoke, part old paper. Even in daylight it seemed reluctant to be anything but secretive. A fire still smoldered in the grate. Sir Reuben's desk stood broad and mahogany dark beneath a green-shaded lamp. To one side, a small escritoire had been arranged for Mr. Gill's use, pens in a neat row, blotter squared, the inkwell capped. The room was orderly in the way an office is orderly, methodical rather than loved. Yet something in it now felt subtly displaced, like a face after illness. Jap led us in, taking care to tread where he had already trodden. "Body was here," he said, pointing to the armchair behind Sir Reuben's desk. Gill was sitting there, facing the fire. Slumped forward, the revolver was on the carpet by his right boot. We moved him, obviously. Poirot stood a little apart, turning his head, slowly from corner to corner, letting the room impress itself upon his mind. I knew he was doing with his eyes what a musician does with his ear, catching discord where another hears only noise. Celeste moved straight to the fireplace with a curious, almost defiant calm. She stood there looking down at a dark scorch mark on the brass fender. "What's that?" she asked. "A cigarette burn," Jap said. "Fresh enough to be last night." Celeste's nostrils flared. "Martin didn't smoke. Uncle doesn't smoke in here. He hates the smell." Poirot's gaze sharpened, like a needle finding thread. "Ah," he murmured. "A small point, but perhaps a sharp one. Tell me, mademoiselle, you say you came in about 9. You saw Mr. Gill here." "He was at the small desk." She pointed without hesitation. Writing. He stood up when I entered. Was the fire lit then? Yes, low. He kept it going at night. And you noticed nothing else? No objects upon this table here? Poirot gestured to a side table near an armchair, where a silver tray sat empty. She frowned, searching her recollection. There was a glass, I think. Whiskey. He wasn't drinking when I came in, but the glass was there. Poirot's eyes flicked to Jap. We did find a glass, Jap said. Rinsed in the pantry sink this morning. No prints but the maid's who washed it. Poirot made a noise of mild disappointment. Shame. It might have told us who was comforting himself. He crossed to the mantelpiece. On it were a clock, a pair of brass candlesticks, and a narrow vase holding chrysanthemums that had begun to droop. He leaned in so close, his mustaches almost brushed the petals. These flowers, he said softly to Sir Reuben. Who put them? The housekeeper, Sir Reuben replied. Every Monday. It is her habit. Poirot nodded, then stepped back. Habits are excellent. They are the nails on which we hang the truth, but sometimes someone removes a nail. He looked down at the hearthrug. The handbag was found there, yes, behind the plant stand. Jap indicated the spot. Avery found it when we were searching for anything odd. It was tucked partly out of sight, but not buried. Poirot crouched with surprising agility for a man of his build and examined the front left leg of the plant stand. A fine scratch ran down it, and a thread of pale fabric clung to the wood like a tiny flag. He touched it with the tip of a pencil and rose again. A thread? Cream-colored. Not from the carpet. Interesting. What does that mean? Celeste asked quickly. It means the stand has been moved recently. Perhaps dragged, perhaps in haste. Poirot's voice was light, but his eyes were not. He went next to the door. The lock and handle had been dusted and redusted. He ran his fingers along the edge of the door frame, then to the hinge, then to the floor. His manner was almost that of a man who examines a painting for the smallest crack in the varnish. There is no secret panel, Jap said, misunderstanding him. We checked. Poirot smiled gently. I do not search for panels, my friend. I search for thoughts. He straightened. Who had keys to this door? Sir Reuben, Jap said. Gill, because he worked in here at night. Avery the butler, and the housekeeper for cleaning. No one else. Poirot nodded. 4 keys in existence. 4 possibilities. But one must not forget the 5th. The 5th, I asked. The key that is not a key. The key of opportunity. Celeste crossed her arms. Are you suggesting a servant did it? Poirot looked at her attentively. I suggest nothing yet, mademoiselle. I only collect the beads before I string them. There was a tap at the door, and Avery entered, as contained as a sealed envelope. He carried a small parcel on a silver salver. Inspector, Sir, Monsieur Poirot. His eyes remained deferential, but assessed everything. This was found in the wastebasket of Mr. Gill's room. The maid was emptying it when I passed. Jap took it, unwrapped it. Inside was a wad of torn paper, the pieces folded together as if someone had tried to destroy them in a hurry, but could not resist keeping them. Poirot held out his hand. May I? Jap surrendered the scraps. Poirot laid them on Sir Reuben's desk with the care of a librarian restoring a manuscript. There were perhaps 10 pieces. On 3 of them, in an angular, precise hand, we could make out words. Meet me, read one. Not safe, read another. And on a third, the fragment of a sentence. The woman who never existed. I felt a prickle on the back of my neck. Celeste let out a short breath, half laugh, half hiss. Sir Reuben stared hard. What the devil is that supposed to mean? Poirot did not answer at once. He looked at the fragments as though he could see through them into the mind that had written them. Then he said quietly, It means, Sir Reuben, that Mr. Gill was afraid, and that he was afraid of a woman who may or may not exist. Jap swore under his breath. That phrase again, So he knew something about this woman. Or believed he did, Poirot corrected. Belief is often more dangerous than knowledge. Celeste leaned forward, her voice taut. Those notes, were they recent? Ash on the edges, Poirot said. He tore them yesterday, perhaps last evening. The paper is still crisp where it has been folded. He did not crush it. He kept it close. Sir Reuben's mouth went thin. My secretary receiving secret letters in my house? Wonderful. Poirot looked at him gently. You did not pry, Sir Reuben. That is a virtue. It is also sometimes a handicap. He turned to Avery. You are a man of method, yes? You notice who comes and goes. Avery inclined his head. It is my duty, monsieur. Then tell me of last night, between 9 and midnight. Who entered this room? Avery's expression did not change. At approximately 9 o'clock, Miss Celeste entered and remained for perhaps 5 minutes. At 10 minutes past 9, Dr. Larkin entered carrying his bag. He remained for a quarter of an hour. At 9:30, Mr. Brackett entered. He remained for perhaps 10 minutes. At 10 o'clock, I brought a tray of soda water and glasses to the drawing room. I did not pass this door again until 5 minutes to 11, when Mr. Gideon Vane entered alone. He came out at 11:15. At midnight precisely, Mr. Gill came in carrying papers. He did not leave again. Japp looked up sharply. Gideon was in here at 11. He never said so. Celeste's eyes flashed. Gideon lies when he thinks it useful. Sir Reuben barked, Celeste. Poirot raised a soothing hand. We will not accuse yet. We will only observe. Mr. Vane was here at 11, and he did not mention it. That is a fact of some weight. He looked down again at the torn paper. One fragment had a smear of something dark along the edge, like dried ink or soot. He held it up to the light. Curious, he murmured. This paper has been soiled by a hand not entirely clean. Ash, perhaps, or the residue of something powdery. Japp frowned. What's that got to do with anything? Poirot set the fragment down carefully. Everything, my good Japp. For if Mr. Gill tore this note in fear, and hid it, and then went to die in this chair, then the thing he feared was in this room with him. He paused, letting the stillness tighten. The rain ticked against the window. The fire made a faint, dry whisper. And so, Poirot added softly, we must discover not only who killed him, but who or what entered this study last night as a woman who never existed. Poirot remained by the desk a moment longer, as though listening to what the wood and paper might murmur if treated politely. Then he gathered the torn fragments into a neat pile, pressed them flat with the palm of his hand, and looked up at Japp. My friend, he said, we will speak with Mr. Gideon Vane at once. He is the bead that is rolling away from the string. Japp grunted assent and went to the door. Celeste moved as if to follow, but Poirot stopped her with a courteous gesture. Not yet, mademoiselle. Your presence would make his tongue stiff. I wish it loose. She hesitated, eyes hard on him. If he's hiding something, you think you can charm it out. Poirot's smile was small. Charm? No, I shall only give him the room to hang himself with his own words. Celeste's mouth twitched, half amusement, half contempt. She let us pass and stayed behind with Sir Reuben and Avery, who looked as if he might have enjoyed being marble. We found Gideon Vane in the billiard room, which was long and dim and smelled faintly of chalk and stale cigar smoke. He had the languid, handsome look Japp had described, too sleek to be solid, like a fox that had learned to wear silk. At the moment, he was leaning on a cue, not playing, merely staring at the green cloth with an air of being personally betrayed by it. He looked up as we entered. His face arranged itself into a rueful smile. Inspector, and you must be Monsieur Poirot. I'm honored, though I confess I'd rather have met you over champagne. Poirot bowed. Champagne is excellent for celebrations. Today we have something less sparkling. Gideon sighed and waved at a chair. Please, sit, though I don't suppose this is a social call. No, said Japp bluntly. It isn't. You were in the study last night, Gideon. Avery saw you go in at 5 to 11 and come out at 15:15. Why didn't you mention it? For a fraction of a second, Gideon's eyelids flickered. It was as tiny as the twitch of a fish beneath water, but Poirot's eyes caught it and held it. I didn't think it mattered, Gideon said lightly. I went in to fetch a book. A book, Japp repeated, at 11 at night. Yes, I couldn't sleep. I remembered Sir Reuben keeps a first edition of Donne in there. I'm fond of Donne. Japp stared at him as though he had announced a fondness for knitting in a pub. Poirot spoke gently. Which poem did you wish to read, monsieur? Gideon blinked. Any of them. No Man is an Island, perhaps. It seemed appropriate. Death in the house and all that. Poirot's expression did not change, but I could feel the little grey cells clicking. That is by John Donne, yes, he said mildly. But not in a first edition, I think. You're sure it was Donne you sought? Gideon laughed too quickly. You've got me, Monsieur Poirot. I'm no scholar. It might have been Milton. Words, anyway. I wanted something to distract me. And did you find your words? Not really, he shrugged. Gil was in there. Working. I didn't want to disturb him, so I poked about a moment, couldn't find what I wanted, and left. Was he alone when you entered? Poirot asked. Yes, alone. Did he speak to you? He looked up, said good evening. I said the same. That was all? Poirot tilted his head with that air of half-idle curiosity that I knew was never idle. You noticed his mood. Gideon paused. He was preoccupied, irritated maybe, but he was often like that. Jill always acted as though the world were trying to steal his inkpot. That is a pretty phrase, Poirot observed, and yet perhaps not yours. Gideon's smile thinned. What do you mean? I mean you are a man who chooses his words like a man choosing a tie. You do it to please. That phrase is not pleasing, it is sharp. It sounds like, how do you say, resentment. Gideon's jaw tightened. You're psychologizing me already. I observe only. It is my defect. Poirot folded his hands. Now tell me, monsieur, when you were in the study, did you smoke? Gideon looked blank. Smoke? No, I don't smoke a pipe. Only cigarettes, and not in Sir Reuben's sanctum. He would bite my head off. And yet there is a fresh cigarette burn on the fender. Gideon's eyes darted left, right, like a man measuring windows. Then Jill must have smoked. Jill did not smoke, I said before I could stop myself. Gideon's gaze snapped to me. How do you know what Jill did? You weren't here. Poirot lifted a hand, calming. The house knows. The servants know. Mademoiselle Celeste knows. So it is a fact. If you did not smoke, and Gil did not smoke, then another smoked, yes? A thin flush came up under Gideon's cheekbones. I can't account for everyone's habits, but you can account for your own movements. Poirot leaned forward slightly. You entered at 5 to 11 and left at 15:15. You did not find your book, yet you remained 10 minutes more than was needed to glance at shelves. Gideon's cue tapped lightly on the floor. Maybe I lingered. Is that a hanging offense? No, but it is a question. Poirot's voice became softer still, which I have learned is when it is most dangerous. A question like this. You have debts. Gideon stiffened. Who told you that? No one. The way you hold your shoulders tells me you are practiced in charming your way out of obligations. Your mother tells me by the sharpness of her eyes at Sir Reuben. And the world tells me because it is full of men who gamble with other people's money. Poirot let the words lie there, not accusing, merely present. Mr. Gill handled accounts. If a man had debts and wished to hide them from Sir Reuben, might he not wish to speak to Mr. Gill? Gideon's breath came a shade faster. Are you suggesting I threatened him? I suggest nothing. I ask if you spoke to him. Gideon stared down at the billiard table. When he looked up again, his manner had lost some of its easy silk. "All right. Yes. I spoke to him," he said. "I asked him something. He refused. I was angry. I left." "Something about money?" Jap asked bluntly. Gideon spread his hands. "What else is ever about money in this damn family? I asked if any of my mother's allowance could be advanced. Gill said no, that Sir Reuben had forbidden it. I told him he was a smug little clerk. He told me to go to bed. That was it." Poirot nodded slowly. "And after that you went where?" "To my room. I poured a drink and tried to sleep. I didn't. I went down to the pantry at one for soda. The maid saw me. You can ask her." Jap made a note. Poirot's eyes, however, were not on the notebook. They were on Gideon's hands. "You wear a ring," he said suddenly. Gideon looked surprised. "Yes. A signet ring. Family thing." Poirot smiled faintly. "Indeed. I ask because rings make impressions. Sometimes in wax, sometimes in softer things." He rose. "Thank you, monsieur. You have been helpful." Gideon's laugh returned, but thinner. "Am I free to go now?" "For the moment," said Jap. "Don't leave the house." As we stepped into the corridor, Gideon called after us, voice a trifle too loud. "If you want villains, Inspector, look nearer the old man's desk. Plenty of people here would like to see him shaken." Poirot did not turn, but when we reached the bend of the hall, he murmured to me, "He lies, Hastings." "About what?" "About the book, about his time, about his anger, perhaps even about the reason. He told the truth only where the truth did not hurt him enough." "You think he killed Gilles?" Poirot's head moved gently side to side. "Not yet. He is frightened, but fear is not always guilt. We must go now to the room of Mr. Gill. The dead man speaks loudest where he lived." We went upstairs. The corridor on the second floor was quieter, as though the house itself held its breath up there. Gill's room was small, neat, and anonymous, like the room of any bachelor who works too much and expects too little. Books in a row, shirts folded with care, a plain suitcase under the bed, a faint, lingering scent of shaving soap and ink. The housekeeper, Mrs. Holloway, stood inside with her apron clenched tight in her fists. She was a capable woman with a clean face and the eye of someone who misses nothing and forgives less. "I've not touched a thing since the inspector said," she announced at once. "But I'll say this, sir. Mr. Gill married no one, and he courted no one I ever saw. If there was a woman, she was a shadow." Poirot thanked her and walked to the narrow desk beneath the window. On it lay an open ledger, a blotter, 2 pens, and a small stack of envelopes tied with string. He untied the string carefully. The envelopes were all the same. Thick cream paper, unmarked except for Gill's name in a feminine hand. Poirot lifted one, sniffed it faintly, and then showed it to me. There was a trace of powder on the flap. Violet sweet, old-fashioned. "The lady writes," he said softly. "So she exists in ink at least." "And he kept them," I whispered. "Yes, and he tore one in fear." Poirot set it down and looked towards the wardrobe, then the washstand, then the fireplace. His gaze paused at the wastebasket, a simple wicker thing that had, apparently, yielded its secret already. He knelt, lifted it, and tipped it slightly. Something slid with a dry whisper from the bottom seam, a tiny square of card folded twice. Poirot opened it. Inside was a visiting card, plain and elegant. Madame Elise Verlaine, Maison d'Odette, Mayfair. No address, no number, only that. Poirot's eyes glittered. "Ah," he murmured. "Now we have not only a woman, but a name. Whether it is true, this is another matter." He slipped the card into his pocket. Then, very softly, as if to himself, he added, "Maison d'Odette, Mayfair. A house of fashion, a house of rendezvous. In any case, a place where women can be invented." From the landing below came a sudden sharp cry, a woman's voice, high and startled, followed by hurried footsteps and Japp's barked command. Poirot straightened at once. "Come, Hastings. The house makes another move." We hurried down the stairs. The cry had come from the drawing room, and as we reached the lower hall, we found it in that state of controlled commotion which an English household assumes when scandal crosses its threshold. A constable stood awkwardly by the door, trying to make himself invisible. Japp was in the center of the room, his shoulders squared, while Lady Ursula Vane occupied a sofa like an actress who has been told the stage is hers. Celeste stood near the fireplace, white about the mouth. Dr. Larkin hovered in the background with the wary attention of a man who listens to pulse and temper alike. Mr. Brackett was by the window, one hand in his pocket, the other tapping a cigarette case against the glass, as if to remind himself he was allowed to breathe. "What has happened?" Poirot asked, mild as milk. Japp jerked a thumb toward Lady Ursula. "Her ladyship's had a shock. Found something she says belongs to her, only it doesn't." Lady Ursula's eyes fixed on Poirot the moment she heard his voice. They were bright, quick, and a little cruel, like jewels that have learned impatience. "Monsieur Poirot," she said, "at last, someone civilized. I insist you deal with this. Inspector Japp is treating me like a pickpocket in a railway station." "Yes?" Poirot approached. "And what is it you have found, madame?" She thrust out her hand. It trembled a little. Not with faintness, I suspected, but with anger. In her palm lay a narrow strip of paper, folded twice, the edges torn. "I discovered this in my writing case not 10 minutes ago," she said. "I did not put it there. And if you will notice..." Poirot took it between finger and thumb, opened it carefully. It was a fragment of a letter in the same angular hand we'd seen upstairs. On it were the words, "If Sir Reuben refuses, then tonight. The bag will be the sign. After that, there is no turning back." Poirot's gaze did not flicker. Only the air in the room felt as if it had tightened. Lady Ursula leaned nearer, voice lowering. "You see now why I refuse to be questioned like a servant. Someone has planted that in my belongings. Someone wishes to implicate me. But I assure you, Monsieur Poirot, I know nothing whatever of Martingale's affairs, nor of any woman's bag." "Well," Japp put in, still bristling, "it's a bit of a coincidence, isn't it? The dead man tears up a note about a bag and a woman, and now a bit of the note turns up in your case." "A coincidence somebody arranged," Lady Ursula snapped. "If you're looking for melodrama, Inspector, you'll find it in my son's pockets or Celeste's temper." Celeste's chin lifted. "My temper doesn't plant papers in your jewelry box." "Writing case," Lady Ursula corrected coldly. "And you have a very pretty temper, my dear, especially when money's involved." "Enough," Sir Reuben said harshly. He had entered without our noticing, and now stood in the doorway, cane clenched, his face a shade darker with fury. "My house is not a market stall for squabbling. Inspector, find the murderer and stop this nonsense." Poirot turned to him with that gentle firmness which made even Sir Reuben's anger feel a little childish. "We will find him, Sir Reuben. But first we must understand why this fragment was placed where it was." He held the strip up thoughtfully. "Madame, when did you last open your writing case before this morning?" Lady Ursula blinked. "Yesterday afternoon. I wrote a note to my maid about a hem. I locked it afterward." "You are certain you locked it?" "Of course. Who has access to your room besides yourself and your maid?" "My maid. Mrs. Holloway, the housekeeper, for cleaning. And perhaps Avery if he brings hot water. And Celeste..." Her eyes flashed. "Since she wanders the house as she pleases." Celeste laughed once without humor. "You'd love that to be true." Poirot nodded, receiving each word as a coin to be weighed later. "And you found it just now. When?" "At 11:45. I went for my blotting paper. It was lying on top as bold as brass." Poirot looked at the fragment again. "The handwriting matches Mr. Gill's fragments. The tear fits the violence of haste. But there is more. He glanced toward Brackett. Monsieur Brackett, last evening you were in the study at 9:30. What was your reason? Brackett started. He was a lean, crisp man with a careful mustache and eyes that seemed to appraise people as if they were stocks. Reason? Business. Sir Reuben sent me in to fetch a file. Jill was there. I spoke to him briefly. About what? About the file. Brackett's tone had the clipped politeness of a man who dislikes being pried into. Poirot's eyes remained kind. And did you notice anything feminine in the room? A scent of perfume, perhaps? A handbag? Brackett's jaw tightened. No. And if you're implying I was meeting some woman, I imply nothing. Poirot's voice was velvet. I ask only what you observed. Brackett's tapping hand stilled. Gill was alone. He looked worried. That's all. Poirot turned to Dr. Larkin. And you, Doctor, you visited the study at 9:10. Why? Larkin, a tall man with a quiet, almost apologetic manner, adjusted his spectacles. Sir Reuben asked me to look at a letter he'd drafted to his solicitor. He wanted my opinion on phrasing. He's been anxious about legal matters. His eyes touched Sir Reuben and slid away. Sir Reuben barked, I wanted a medical man's view on the stress of the thing, that's all. Poirot inclined his head. Naturally. Then he looked at Gideon, who lounged near the doorway pretending not to listen, and at Celeste, who was too alert to pretend anything. We have in this house, Poirot said softly, a dead man who feared a woman, a handbag that appears where no woman admits to being, a note torn in fear, and now a fragment placed like a dagger in the possessions of Madame. This is not random. It is a design. Japp shifted. You think the murderer's framing Lady Ursula? Perhaps. Or perhaps someone frames her so that another may hide behind her shadow. There are many uses for a shadow. Poirot folded the strip and placed it carefully into his pocket. Madame, you will forgive me, but I must ask one more question. Are you acquainted with the name Elise Verlaine? Lady Ursula stared. Elise Verlaine? Never heard of her. Celeste's head snapped up. Who is she? A name on a visiting card found among Mr. Gill's things, Poirot replied gently. A lady in Mayfair, perhaps, or a lady invented to be in Mayfair. We shall see. Sir Reuben's face was flint. Mayfair. That's where my secretary went on his evenings off. I thought he was playing cards. It seems he was playing with lives. Lady Ursula rose abruptly. If there is some harlot involved, it has nothing to do with me. I will not be dragged into Martin Gill's sordidness. Poirot's expression became sympathetic in that maddening way which made people feel understood even when they were being dissected. Madame, sometimes sordidness comes dressed in silk. We must not decide too quickly in what costume our lady wears. At that moment, Avery appeared at the door, his composure for once showing a hairline crack. Inspector, Monsieur Poirot. His voice was lower than usual. There is someone at the gate, a woman. She insists on seeing Mr. Gill. She says she has an appointment. The room froze. Even the fire seemed to pause in its crackle. A woman? Celeste breathed. Yes, miss. She is very certain of herself. Japp swore softly. Well, that settles one thing. The woman exists after all. Poirot's eyes were bright now, but his face stayed calm. Does she give her name? She says she is Madame Elise Verlaine. No one moved for a second. Then Lady Ursula let out a laugh that sounded like a snapped thread. Well, she said too loudly, your ghost has walked straight in, Monsieur Poirot. Perhaps she'll explain her bag. Poirot stepped toward the door with the quiet decisiveness of a man going to meet fate at a tea table. Yes, he said softly. Let her come in, and let us all observe her very carefully. For a woman who arrives after a murder to keep an appointment with the dead is either very foolish or very dangerous. Avery withdrew, and a minute later, the drawing-room door opened again. The woman who entered was not at all what I had expected from the phrase Madame Elise Verlaine. I had imagined something theatrical. Velvet, jewels, a cigarette holder tilted at an angle. Instead, she came in with a quiet assurance that needed no ornament. She was perhaps 30, slender, dressed in black that was simple but of unmistakably good cut. A small hat sat low on her fair hair. Her face was pale, composed and very beautiful in a way that seemed almost deliberate, as though beauty had been chosen rather than given. She carried no handbag. Her eyes traveled the room with a calm that was startling in the circumstances. They paused on Japp's uniform, on Sir Reuben's cane, on Celeste's tightened mouth, on Lady Ursula's glittering hostility, and then came to rest on Poirot. There, for the first time, a faint flicker showed, not of fear, but of calculation. "Monsieur Poirot," she said quietly, and I could not help noticing that the pronunciation was flawless. "So I am not too late." Poirot bowed, his manner impeccable, as though receiving a guest for tea rather than a woman walking into a murder inquiry. "Madame, you are exactly on time for the questions we must ask, but perhaps too late for the appointment you expected." Her gaze did not falter. "Martin is dead, then?" It was not a question, not even a lament, merely a statement of fact, accepted. Japp stepped forward, unable to contain himself. "That's right. And you'll come with me, madam. We need to know who you are and what you are doing arranged to meet him." She regarded him with mild curiosity, the way one regards a loud dog. Poirot intervened softly. "Inspector, allow me. Madame has come of her own will. She will not run away while we are polite." Japp muttered, but stood aside. Poirot offered her a chair near the fire. She sat with straight back and folded hands. Only then did I see that her gloves were the exact pale cream of the thread Poirot had found on the plant stand. Poirot's eyes also saw it. He said nothing yet. He never pounces. He waits until the prey has arranged its own trap. "Madame Elise Verlaine," he began pleasantly. "You keep an establishment in Mayfair called Maison d'Odette." She inclined her head. "Yes. A fashion house?" "Among other things." "Ah." Poirot smiled faintly. "A house where ladies may be dressed to appear as themselves, or as someone else." Her lips curved a fraction. "If a lady wishes to appear as someone else, Monsieur Poirot, clothes are only the first step. But yes, we supply what is required." Lady Ursula made a small sound of outrage. Poirot did not look at her. "And you are acquainted with Mr. Martingale?" "Yes." "In what capacity?" Her eyes rested on the flames a moment. "He began as a client, not for himself, for someone else. Then he became a friend." Celeste leaned forward, voice sharp. "A friend who wrote you letters and tore them up in panic." Madame Verlaine turned her head and looked at Celeste fully for the first time. There was no offense in her gaze, only a clear, appraising interest. "Perhaps," she said calmly, "sometimes people do foolish things when they are afraid." "Afraid of what?" Sir Reuben snapped. She looked at him. "Afraid of being discovered." Sir Reuben's face darkened. "Discovered doing what?" Madame Verlaine's tone remained even. "Helping your household avoid a scandal." A faint stillness fell. It was the sort of remark that makes a room lean in. Poirot's voice was mild. "You will explain, madame." She nodded, as if she had already decided to do so. 2 months ago, Mr. Gill came to me with a request. He said a lady wished to visit Wisteria Lodge discreetly. She could not do so as herself. She was prominent. The visit must be unremarkable, unseen. He asked if I could provide her with an identity that would pass among servants and guests without question. Japp frowned. "You mean a disguise?" "Not a disguise," she corrected him gently. "A complete person. Clothes, papers, card case, handwriting samples. An explanation that could be believed. We do such things, Inspector, for actresses, for ladies with difficult families, for wives wishing to test husbands. You would be surprised how often society rents a second skin. Gideon let out a low whistle. Lady Ursula's eyes narrowed like a cat's. Poirot asked softly, "And the identity you provided was—" She hesitated, but not from shame. More from the need to be accurate. A widow from the continent, a small fortune, a reason to travel, a name no one in your circle would recognize. Her gaze flicked briefly to Sir Reuben. The Lady Nadine Roussel. Celeste's breath caught. "Nadine?" Sir Reuben barked. "I don't know any Nadine Roussel." "Exactly," Madame Verlaine said. "That was why she was safe." Poirot's eyes were intent. "So this Lady Nadine visited the house?" "Yes, twice. Both times late. Both times by arrangement with Mr. Gill, who met her in the study. She stayed perhaps half an hour. She was never seen by anyone else." "Because she did not exist," I murmured. Madame Verlaine looked at me, faint amusement returning. "She existed while she wore the clothes I gave her." Poirot nodded. "And the handbag found in the study, was it hers?" Her composure wavered for the first time. It was like a glass showing a hairline crack. "Yes." "Then why was she not here at breakfast?" Japp demanded. "Where is she now?" Madame Verlaine's hands tightened on her gloves. "I do not know. That is why I came. Martin and I agreed to meet this morning. He sent me a note yesterday, urgent, saying the lady had changed the plans, that there was danger, that he needed my help to prevent something terrible. He told me to come at 11. I came. I found constables at your gate instead." Poirot's voice was gentle. "You received his note at Maison d'Odette?" "Yes. Delivered by messenger." "And you kept it?" "I burned it after reading, for his protection. I did not think—" She stopped, eyes flaring with something like anger at herself. "I did not think he would be killed before I arrived." Poirot leaned slightly forward. "Tell me, madame, did Mr. Gill say who the lady truly was?" Her gaze went to the fire again. "No, he protected her name fiercely. He said only that if she were identified, it would ruin her, and perhaps others." "Others in this room?" Poirot asked softly. She did not answer directly. "He told me she had reason to fear Sir Reuben." An electric pause. Sir Reuben's voice came out like stone striking stone. "Fear me? Why should any woman fear me?" Madame Verlaine met his eyes. "Because, Sir Reuben, she believed you had power over her future, and she was desperate to change it." Celeste stood abruptly, the movement sharp. "This is nonsense. If some secret woman was sneaking in here, why would Martin help her? He was Uncle's man." Madame Verlaine looked at Celeste almost kindly. "He was your uncle's secretary, but he was also a man with a conscience. Perhaps he saw someone trapped. Perhaps he loved her. Perhaps she paid him. I do not know which. I only know he was frightened for her." Poirot's voice fell very softly, cutting through the tension like silk over glass. "Madame, last night a cigarette was smoked in the study. You say the lady visited twice before. Did she smoke?" "Yes," said Madame Verlaine at once. "Always. A very strong brand. French. She said it calmed her." Poirot nodded. "Then there was a visit last night." Madame Verlaine's eyes widened. "There should not have been. Martin told me she would not come again until after today." Poirot let that settle, then asked the question that hung there, inevitable as a pendulum. "Madame, you are wearing cream gloves. Were they part of the lady's outfit?" She looked down at them, startled, as if noticing them for the first time. "No, they are mine." Poirot's eyes were warm but relentless. "I asked because a cream thread was found on the plant stand in the study. It was dragged to hide a handbag. Your gloves match precisely. Tell me truly, were you in that study last night?" Her face went still, that careful composure returning as a shield. "No." Poirot did not contradict her. He merely nodded as if accepting a note in a ledger. "Very well," he said. "Then someone else wore gloves like yours. Someone else moved the stand. Someone else wished to conceal the lady's bag after she departed, or after something happened to her." Madame Verlaine's voice dropped. "You think she's dead too?" Poirot's reply was quiet. "I think, madame, that there are now two women in this affair. One who exists and sits before me, and one who exists only when she is made to. We must find the second before she disappears completely." Behind us, the clock on the Iati mantel chimed noon. Slow, deliberate strokes. As the last note faded, Avery entered again, his face now plainly troubled. "Monsieur Poirot, Inspector Japp." He swallowed. "The gardener has found something by the old summer house, a scarf, and there are marks in the wet ground as if someone was dragged." Madame Verlaine went white. Poirot rose at once, his voice calm but edged now with urgency. "Come, Hastings. Come, Inspector. We go to the garden. If Our Lady who never existed has left a trace there, it may be the last trace she ever leaves." The garden behind Wisteria Lodge had the melancholy of November about it. Sodden grass, bare rose canes, and a sky that pressed low as if eavesdropping. We crossed the terrace and followed Avery and the gardener down a path that curved toward a small summer house half hidden by yew. The ground there was soft with rain, and the marks were plain enough even to my untrained eye. Deep scuffs like heels digging in, a long furrow where something weighty had been pulled. The scarf lay in a puddle of brown leaves. Poirot lifted it delicately on the end of his cane. It was silk, pale blue, very fine, and the faintest trace of violet perfume rose from it. "A lady has been here," I murmured. "Yes," Poirot said quietly. "Or a lady has been made to seem here. But these marks are not the invention of a maison d'Odette. They are made by fear and by force." Japp crouched, running his hand around the furrow, dragged toward the shrubbery, then up the path to the side drive. If someone was taken away, it was done quick. Poirot's gaze moved not to the furrow, but to the small details around it. A broken twig, a pressed patch of grass near the summerhouse step, a faint glint in the mud. He bent, pinched the glint between thumb and forefinger, and held it up. A tiny metal button, round and gold, engraved with a crown and a number. "Army," Japp said at once. "Officer's button." Poirot nodded. "So, our second woman, Our Lady who never existed when she wished to, came last night after all. She smoked, she met Mr. Gill, and afterwards there was violence here. An officer's button is lost, a scarf is dropped. The earth remembers what the mouths conceal." "Then where is she now?" Celeste's voice came from behind us. She had followed, unable to help herself. Her eyes were bright with dread and something else. Something that looked very like wounded pride. Poirot turned to her gently. "That is what we shall discover, mademoiselle. But first, we must stop trying to chase the lady in the dark. We must bring the light to her." He spoke to Japp in a low voice, and Japp nodded, grim and practical. The constables were sent to search the side drive and the outbuildings. Avery was instructed to have all the residents remain inside, and no one was to leave the house. Within an hour, Japp returned. Mud on his boots, rain on his coat. His face said enough before he spoke. "They found her," he said, "in the tool shed by the kitchen garden, dead, smothered, been there since last night." Celeste made a sound that was half breath, half sob, and put a hand to the wall. Sir Reuben went very still, as if some inner mechanism had jammed. Poirot closed his eyes a moment. Not in shock. He saves his emotions for private rooms, but in the small courtesy he pays to the dead. "Then there are two murders," he said simply. "And now we know this affair is not to frighten or to frame only. It is to silence." Japp blew out his cheeks. "We've got a woman dead who no one admits knowing except Verlaine, and Gill dead in the locked study. How does that help?" "It helps," Poirot said softly. "Because the two deaths are one story. The same hand wrote them." He turned to the house. "Bring them together, Japp. All of them. The drawing room in half an hour." They assembled with the reluctant obedience of people who know that disobedience looks like guilt. Sir Reuben sat rigid by the fire, cane across his knees like a bar. Celeste stood behind his chair, her face pale and controlled. Lady Ursula took a sofa, chin raised as if the thing were a matinee arranged for her entertainment. Gideon lounged near the drinks table, but his eyes had the sharpness of an animal caught in a trap. Brackett hovered at the window, nervous now, no longer indignant. Dr. Larkin sat apart, hands neatly folded, too composed for the hour. Madame Verlaine waited by the door, as if she preferred to leave before the morale ended. Poirot stood in front of them, small and immaculate, like a judge who dislikes theatrics but understands their use. "Mesdames et messieurs," he began, "I ask your patience. We have here a tragedy in 2 acts, and both acts turn on one idea: a woman who never existed." Lady Ursula sniffed. "We understand that part." "Do we?" Poirot's eyes rested on her a moment, then moved on. "Let us be exact. The woman who came to this house as Lady Nadine Roussel did not exist in society. She was created, but the flesh beneath the clothes, that flesh existed very much. She was someone real, someone whose presence here would have caused an earthquake." Celeste's breath tightened. Sir Reuben stared stonily ahead. "Mr. Gill," Poirot continued, "arranged for her entrance in secrecy. He was frightened for her, yes, but also frightened of what she was doing. For yesterday, he received a note. You all saw the fragments. It said, 'If Sir Reuben refuses, then tonight the bag will be the sign.' That tells us 2 things. First, that there was a demand made upon Sir Reuben, one he might refuse. Second, that there was a plan for last night." Brackett shifted. "What demand?" Poirot tilted his head. "We come to that. But first, the locked study. Mr. Gill worked late. The study door was locked from inside when his body was found. Only 4 keys existed. Yet the killer was inside with him. How? Simple. Mr. Gill opened the door to someone he trusted, and afterward the door was locked with his own key, placed where it would later be found by his hand. This is not difficult if you are already in the room when the lock is turned." Japp frowned. "So the killer stayed inside afterward?" "None. The killer left by the side door of the study, the small door that opens into the passage toward the pantry. You forget it because it is hidden by the curtain. I did not forget it because there was a fresh scuff on the lower hinge and a faint smear of garden soil on the threshold." He looked at Japp apologetically. "You are excellent, my friend, but you do not always look low enough." Japp muttered, but did not argue. Poirot went on. "The handbag was concealed behind the plant stand. That stand was dragged. There was a scratch and a cream thread. The handbag belonged to Lady Nadine. It was hidden because when the killer left, he did not want anyone to see that a woman had been there. Why? Because her identity would lead straight to him." "Who was she?" Celeste asked hoarsely. Poirot turned to her. "She was a woman from your uncle's past, mademoiselle. A woman he once loved in the stern way a young man loves before he decides love is a weakness." Sir Reuben exploded. "This is nonsense." Poirot's voice was gentle, and for that reason, unstoppable. "Sir Reuben, 30 years ago you had an affair with a young governess employed by your sister. You sent her away when she became inconvenient. You never knew, because she never told you, that she bore your child." A silence fell so hard it seemed to bruise the air. Lady Ursula's mouth opened, then shut. Brackett stared. Gideon went grey. Celeste swayed slightly, gripping the chair back. Poirot nodded slowly. "Yes, the woman who came as Nadine Roussel was Marianne Duclos. She was once Marianne Astwell by dream, if not by law, and she came because she was ill, desperate, and had decided that her daughter must not be left with nothing. She wanted Sir Reuben to acknowledge the daughter, privately, not publicly. A sum of money, perhaps a provision in the will. Mr. Gill was intermediary because he had discovered the truth in old letters. He pitied her. He was also, I believe, in love with her in a quiet, hopeless way. Madame Verlaine's face softened, just for an instant. Poirot's eyes swung to Gideon, but there was another who discovered the secret. Gideon held up both hands with a lazy smile that did not reach his eyes. Oh, here it comes. Because I'm the family wastrel, I'm the obvious villain. Not because you are a wastrel, Poirot said, but because you are clever enough to be dangerous and desperate enough to be reckless. You entered the study at 11 not to find Don, but to confront Gil. You had overheard a conversation. Between Gil and your mother, perhaps. Or between Gil and Sir Reuben. You knew a secret woman was coming. You guessed she threatened your inheritance. You also knew your own debts were large and growing. You waited. When Marianne Duclos came after midnight, you followed. You argued with Gil while she was in the study. She smoked. She left her handbag. There was a struggle, because Gil would not assist you in silencing her. You shot him. You placed the revolver by his hand. Then, while still inside, you locked the door with his key. You left by the side passage. But you were not finished. If the woman lived, she could reveal everything. So you met her outside near the summer house, perhaps telling her you had a message from Gil. There was another struggle. Your army button fell. You smothered her with the gardener's sack, exactly the kind of thing a man grabs when he panics. You carried her to the tool shed, then you hid her handbag behind the plant stand to erase her from last night. Gideon's face had gone from gray to a kind of sickly white. The silk in him was gone. Only the fox remained. That's insane, he said thickly. Poirot sighed. No, monsieur. It is sadly sane. You're not a monster. You're only a man who wanted a future and did not see that murder destroys futures more surely than any illegitimate sister. Lady Ursula made a strangled sound. Gideon! His eyes flicked to her like a trapped animal's. She was going to ruin us. You heard it. She was going to take what should have been ours. It was never yours, Sir Reuben said quietly. Gideon laughed once. Raw. You always said that, and Gil said it, and that woman said it with her eyes. I couldn't. His voice broke into fury. I couldn't go back to nothing. Japp stepped forward, handcuffs ready. Gideon made no move to run. He only stared at Poirot with a look that was half hatred, half bewildered admiration. You didn't have proof, he whispered. You just knew. Poirot's face was sad. Proof is for courts. Knowing is for men who listen. You lied about your book, about your time, about your talk with Jill. But the smallest thing betrayed you. Your hand smelled faintly of violet this morning. You had touched the scarf. And when I asked if you smoked, your eyes went once to the side door because you remembered her cigarette. That is psychology, monsieur. The body speaks when the mouth refuses. Gideon sagged. Japp led him out. For a long moment, no one moved. Then Celeste spoke, very softly to Sir Reuben. Did you know? Sir Reuben's shoulders seemed older than his years. No. The word was scraped out of him. I did not know she existed. I wronged her long ago. I cannot unmake it. Celeste's eyes filled, not with tears, but with a hard brightness. Then make something else. Something better. Poirot watched them with a gentle, unreadable pity. He turned at last to Madame Verlaine. Madame, you have done a dangerous business, but not a wicked one. Yet perhaps now you will consider what it costs to create people out of air. She met his gaze steadily. People create themselves out of air every day, Monsieur Poirot. I only sell the costumes. Poirot bowed. Perhaps. But sometimes air turns to poison. Outside rain fell in a steady hush, as if to clean the garden of one more secret. Poirot took my arm as we went toward the hall. Come, Hastings, he said softly. The case is finished, but the heart is never finished. We are all capable of inventing a person, yes? But we must be careful whom we invent and why, for every illusion has its price, and the bill is always presented in the end. He adjusted his mustache, with a little sigh of weariness that was almost a prayer for order, and we stepped out of the drawing room, leaving behind a household that had learned, too late, what happens when a woman who never existed is forced to become real.